Hello, and welcome to the USDA Food and Nutrition Services, or F&S, online training series. This module will provide you with the necessary requirements on updating the F&S Advanced Planning documents. These are the acronyms that are used in this module. I will give you a little bit of time to read over these. This presentation is one of a multi-part series covering the entire advanced planning document process and the rules and guidance for state agencies to get the approval and funding that is needed from F&S to carry out an information system project. This is the fifth module in the series. These modules are best viewed in the order presented on this slide as the AP processes, requirements, and terminology continues to build on each other in later modules. At the end of this module, you will be able to name the different types of APD updates, choose the appropriate required documents for an APDU annual submission, identify the difference between the APDU annual and the APDU as needed, define the emergency acquisition request, explain the purpose of an EAR, and identify the steps for an APD closure. There are two types of APD updates. An annual APDU is a yearly submission that provides a status update on the project and the APD. An APDU as needed is triggered by special situations or events that require a more immediate update and approval than the annual APDU. So let's go further into the APDU annual. The APDU annual can be thought of as a status report. States are required to provide an annual update on all approved multi-year planning APD and implementation APD projects. It documents for F&S what progress and accomplishments have been made to the project which was approved as a PAPD or an IAPD. The annual APDU should not provide F&S with any surprises. The annual APDU keeps a state's PAPD or IAPD current by periodically updating F&S on the project status. It provides the progress, accomplishments, and any problems encountered. It includes any changes in the plan, budget, or schedule. If F&S initially granted a limited or conditional approval for the project, the annual APDU may be used to request approval for successive phases of the project. The information provided on the project status through the annual APDU not only updates F&S, but also helps us work with you to address any major issues. Documentation requirements start with a transmittal letter with an official signature from someone that has authority to commit state resources to the project. An update on the project status, such as the major accomplishments, challenges, resolutions, and outstanding issues. It must also provide us with the changes to the approved PAPD or IAPD. The update must report changes to the approved APD, such as project scope or requirements changes. Examples might include increases or decreases in the schedule, or the addition or deletion of activities or deliverables. The revised budget might include increases or decreases to the estimated amounts. The actual expenditures by federal fiscal year and quarter to date must be included. Please refer to the APD website for a sample APDU budget. Providing information on contractor performance is optional but highly appreciated. Information might include any significant issues experienced and their resolutions or a status update. This could also include any significant change orders to contracts and any noteworthy strengths or weaknesses in contractor performance. The information we obtain about the progress of your project can help other states benefit from your best practices and lessons learned. You should note that the annual APDU is due based on the date your initial PAPD or IAPD was approved. The annual update is due 60 days prior to the anniversary date of the initial approved PAPD, or IAPD. The update should be submitted electronically with the appropriate scanned or e-signature. The update needs to be sent to the FNS Regional Administrator or appropriate Regional Program Director with a copy to the State Systems Office Director or the assigned State Systems Office Analyst. When you prepare your update, it is very helpful to us if you either keep the same format as you used in the original APD or make specific references to the original document in your update. Once the update is received, the FNS timeframe for reviewing APDUs is 60 days, so please plan your project timeframes accordingly. Every state agency's project is important, and they are all on a schedule. It's safest to plan your project timeframe with adequate federal review time in mind, at least 60 days for each document. We are held accountable for that. So, we've covered the annual APDU, which is a yearly submission that provides updates on the project. An APDU as needed is triggered by certain situations or events that require a more immediate update and approval than the annual APDU. Here are the triggers which would require an APDU as needed. Significant changes to an approved PAPD or IAPD must be reported to FNS as soon as you become aware of them by submitting an APDU as needed. A change may include increases in SNAP total project costs of over $10 million or 10% of the total project, whichever is less, and in a WIC project, an increase in total project costs of over $100,000 must be reported. If there are significant changes or delays to approved project milestones that are greater than 120 days in a SNAP project or 90 days in a WIC project, then an APDU as needed must be submitted. An APDU as needed must be submitted as soon as significant changes are known to avoid any gaps in funding approval. States are liable for the costs of project changes that do not comply with the APD document which was initially approved. Please note that more information on these triggers can be found on the APD website in FNS Handbook 901. The APDU as needed also identifies key factors that are changing the course of a project. These include not only the nature of the proposed change, but also the effect that the change will have on those portions of the project in which FNS and the state have already invested. Examples include significant changes in procurement methodology, cost allocation methodology, the project scope, or the system architecture. A significant change in an approved system concept or project scope might include a proposal of a different system alternative, a change in the system hardware or software platform, a change in the project plan, or a change in the cost-benefit projection. The APDU as needed is not an optional submission, but is mandated by these triggers. The APDU must be submitted no later than 90 days from the time when significant changes are anticipated to occur. It is important to remember that prior approval from FNS is required whenever you make a significant change to your plans. If you don't contact us before you incur expenses, states are at risk for the costs of the project changes that do not comply with the approved APD until approval is granted. Please communicate with FNS early and often to avoid disallowances. Poor planning or lack of communication is not considered a valid reason for retroactive approval of expenditures. I will briefly go over the documentation requirements for the APDU as needed. When you submit an as-needed document, only the portions containing significant changes need to be submitted, not the entire APDU. Documentation requirements start with a transmittal letter with an official signature from someone that has the authority to commit state resources to the project. The APDU as needed should be sent to the FNS Regional Administrator or appropriate Regional Program Director with a copy to the State Systems Office Director or the assigned State Systems Office Analyst. An executive summary is required. It describes at a high level the reason for the significant changes in the project and how these changes will impact the project's scope, approach, cost, schedule, and resources. The project status includes the major accomplishments, challenges, and resolutions, and any outstanding issues. The changes to the approved PAPD or IAPD identify all changes to the approved APD, including changes to language or requirements. There are several areas where a change might trigger the need for an APD update. These include a revision to the schedule of activities, milestones, and deliverables from the approved APD of 120 days or greater for a SNAP project or 90 days for a WIC project. The technical approach refers to changes to the technical specifications and requirements of the system under development. Examples might include changing from a distributed closed system to a web-based system, from a mainframe system to a PC-based system, or from a proprietary programming language to an open source language. The revised functional requirements include notable additions to or deletions from the last defined functional requirements for the system. Examples might include removing an interface or a function such as a growth chart plotting or adding customized reports. The revised budget includes an increase of more than $10 million or 10% of a SNAP overall total project, whichever is less, and an increase of $100,000 for a WIC project. If an APD as needed is submitted, the actual expenditures to date must be reported by federal fiscal year and quarter. The revised project management plan and revised resource requirements address changes in key personnel and staffing and the associated duties of people working on the project. Examples may include moving project management in-house instead of contracting for project management services, replacing key state or contractor personnel, losing essential resources in either the program or technical areas, or changing the scope of quality assurance duties. A revised cost allocation plan would address any change in the approved plan resulting from budget increases or the addition or removal of participating programs. We encourage states to provide us with any contractor performance, such as any identified issues, resolutions, strengths, and weaknesses, and any significant change orders. To maintain consistency with other federal agencies and lessen the state reporting burden, FNS may waive the submission of another annual APDU for up to 18 months. FNS may waive the requirement for a state to submit its annual APDU when it has submitted an APDU as needed within 6 months of the APDU annual due date. FNS may either reset the state's anniversary date for submitting its next annual APDU from the date of the original APD approval to that of the APDU as needed approval, or waive the annual APDU approval date for that year, as long as the budget submitted for the APDU as needed covers the full period. FNS reserves the right to request additional information or updates in the interim. Please contact us for more assistance. So what happens if your small project gets bigger than you expected and it crosses the threshold for FNS prior approval? If your project reaches the dollar thresholds which trigger the submission of an APD, you must submit an APD for the entire project. This is why it is important to get good estimates for your cost before you begin your project. Don't worry, we will review the whole project, and as long as the state acted in good faith, FNS won't disallow things that were not subject to approval at the time they occurred. Please refer to the FNS Handbook 901 to review the APD dollar threshold requirements. As a reminder, the handbook is posted on the APD website. When you are planning or updating your project, please talk to us to confirm that you understand the APD requirements and to give us advance notice of your plans. Let's have a progress check. What are the different types of APD updates? The two types of APD updates are the annual APD update and the APD update as needed. Submission document updates for the annual APDU are optional. True or false? False. The submission document updates for the annual APDU are required. Which APD update is used for special reporting? The APD update as needed is used for special reporting. Now that we have had an APDU progress check, there are two other topic areas that will be covered in this session. The Emergency Acquisition Request, also known as the EAR, and the other is the APD closure. In the APD world, the EAR is a brief written request that provides a means for a state to take prompt action due to a demonstrated emergency. Emergency situations are those in which the state agency can demonstrate to FNS an immediate need to acquire information system equipment or services to continue operation of an FNS program, and that the need prevents the state from following the normal prior approval requirements. Examples of such situations include equipment failure attributed to physical damage or destruction caused by natural or other disasters, and changes imposed by federal legislative requirements that necessitate immediate acquisition of information system equipment or services. Poor planning is not considered an emergency situation, and the use of an EAR is not allowed in such circumstances. An EAR allows a state to take prompt action on acquisition that under normal circumstances would be approved under IAPD timeframes, but due to extenuating circumstances, it requires immediate action. Rather than using the 60-day timeframe, FNS will review an EAR within 14 days. The documentation requirements for an EAR include a description of the needed items, an estimate of the costs, the procurement method to be used, the cause of the emergency, and the likely adverse effect if the procurement is not immediately conducted. The required information may be included in the state's transmittal letter, or the EAR can be a separate document enclosed with the transmittal letter. As we noted previously, poor planning does not constitute a legitimate emergency. Please begin your normal acquisition procedures in a timely manner during non-emergency situations. Communications from FNS about your disaster or emergency do not constitute approval for emergency information system acquisitions. You must follow the APD process and receive approval specifically for your EAR. If a state commits funds prior to receiving FNS approval, it does so at its own risk. All acquisitions approved under an EAR must be submitted as an IAPD, which will allow FNS to review and approve the plan under normal IAPD provisions. If a state does not submit an approvable IAPD or IAPDU within 90 days after the date of the initial EAR, FNS funding for the emergency acquisition may be disallowed. Before we discuss the last topic in this session, please note that if a project becomes dormant or abandoned, FNS will determine its status and may collect all funds or recover any unspent funds. The last topic is the APD closure. It is submitted when all of the work approved in the APD has been completed. When FNS reviews a state's APD closure, we will confirm whether or not your project objectives have been met and what costs have been incurred. We may request additional documentation to complete our review. I will briefly cover the 9 items needed for APD closure. The amount of detail you provide for the closure will be more for an IAPD than for a PAPD. The final project plan should reflect all of the work completed. The final budget should show all expenditures by line item, by program, and by federal fiscal year and quarter. If applicable, the final cost allocation should reflect all contributing entities. Additional items include a list of the deliverables and payments made and whether they went to contractors or state IT staff, a description of the goals met by the project and any deviations from the last approved APDU, a description of any problems encountered during system development and implementation and their resolution. The last items needed for APD closure are a description of any outstanding issues and how these issues will be resolved. These outstanding issues should be minor ones. If they are major, closure of the APD cannot occur. An updated estimate of annual operating costs for the new system and documentation of any post-implementation review or reports conducted by the state or contractors. Many of the closure items will be included in a post-implementation review report, so it will not be necessary for you to duplicate those that have been addressed. As a reminder, the APD closure process can be found in FNS Handbook 901. If a project has been active, the closure will occur after all of its activities have been completed. When the APD closure with the 9 closure items are approved, FNS terminates funding activities and officially closes the APD. We will close this module with a progress check. What is an EAR, or EAR? An APD submitted due to lack of planning, an APD submitted due to extenuating circumstances, or a disaster recovery plan. An emergency acquisition request is an APD submitted due to extenuating circumstances. What is your best resource for guidance on the APD closure process? A. This training module. B. USDA SNAP website. C. FNS Handbook 901. Or D. Wikipedia. The answer is C. FNS Handbook 901 is the best source for guidance on the APD closure process. The handbook is the go-to document for guidance on the entire APD process. Here's a review of the learning outcomes for this module. There are 2 different types of APD updates, the annual APD update and the APD update as needed. An APD update as needed is triggered by certain situations or events that require a more immediate update and approval than the annual APDU, which is basically a status update. We also covered what is required for the FNS review and coordination of these different updates. I defined an emergency acquisition request, or EAR, as a brief written request that provides a means for a state to take prompt action due to a demonstrated emergency. I also explained the EAR process. The last item covered was the process and steps for closing out the APD. Your next goal should be learning more about the new changes involved with system testing. This completes the session on the Advanced Planning Document Update. If you have any questions, please visit us at the FNS APD website as noted on this slide. The FNS Handbook 901 is your best resource. You may also contact us directly if you need more information or assistance. Thank you for your time.